everybody. Thanks for tuning into the channel today. Today we're going to be talking about where guitars come from. Sort of like the birds and bees of the guitar world. I have gotten several comments on a video I did for a Correa guitar that I bought for my wife a while back, and there has been kind of a little dispute on there. Not really a friendly one, not really, not mean-spirited or anything, but people have been taking me to task for saying it was a guitar from an Australian company. And people keep coming back and say, well, the guitar was made in Guangzhou, China, and it's a Chinese guitar, a Chinese company, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, that led me to kind of the topic of like, where do guitars come from? Traditionally, if you grew up like when I did, back in like when I first started playing guitar was in the early 70s. I was a teenager, and at that time, you had a market of like Gibson and Fender, maybe Gretsch. Gretsch was less popular at the time, but Gibson and Fender were the two dominant players in the guitar market in the United States. They had both been purchased by big conglomerates during that time. In the late 60s, about 68, Fender was purchased by CBS, and Gibson was bought by a company called CMI Norlin or something like that. And during that time, the guitar world kind of changed a little bit, because basically these the name brand guitars then were altered somewhat in their design, because they were trying to put large-scale manufacturing efficiencies on basically what is a craftsman type situation where you're building a musical instrument. Same thing happened in the piano world. Baldwin and Steinway and a couple of other large piano companies were acquired by big companies that made furniture, and they're like, well, a piano is just a piece of furniture, so why can't we just use the same efficiencies to build a piano? And they really, the big corporate heads, the hedge funds and the investors and stuff that were behind these takeovers, were really not looking at a musical instrument as a piece of art, because that's really, each instrument really is a piece of artwork, and you use that piece of artwork to create more art. And so if you look at in the guitar world, Gibson and Fender during the 70s, that was a time that quality control really suffered. Now those instruments are becoming collectible because they've survived 40, 50 years now, and are but compared to the ones that were made in the 50s and early 60s, they were really not as good. And I remember like being a teenager and looking at a Les Paul, and a Les Paul you could buy at the time for about $595, and then you'd pay another $95 for the case or something like that. And now you're going to pay like $4,000 for that Les Paul. But I remember looking at them and just saying, okay, along the binding there'd be like blobs of finish and stain and things like this, or fret ends that weren't beveled properly, and crappy tuning machines, and they just really they weren't great guitars, is what you'd expect. A lot of the modern guitars today that we get are so much better than the guitars were back then. The Fenders, for example, a Fender Stratocaster you could buy for $375. During the 70s they went to the 3-bolt neck configuration, which was not as stable as the 4-bolt neck. They cut a lot of corners on those guitars, and they just really weren't as good as the instruments that we have today. And many of your upper level Squier models today are every bit as good as what those Fenders were at the time. I remember playing them. I remember looking at them and going like, oh, this is really not as well manufactured as you thought it would be. And for $375 you could get a Strat now that would cost you $3,000. So the music market changed over the years and everything. There were brands that were made in Japan in particular, and some of them in Italy and other places in the world, but primarily in the US market, the student level instruments were the ones made in Japan, and those were your Epiphone lines, Kent, Ventura, Hondo. There was just a whole bunch of them. Takamine, when they first came out making acoustic guitars, they were making copies. They always refer to them as the lawsuit guitars because of the lawsuits that went on of copying the trademarked kind of designs and stuff. But like my first 12 string I owned was a Takamine copy of a Martin D18, and it looked just like it. Even the logo, the script for the Takamine and Sons on the top there looked just like the C.F. Martin and Sons. The tuners and stuff all looked the same. They weren't as high quality materials as the Martin was, but they were copying American designs. Where now Takamine has evolved into a full up, I mean, professional level company with professional grade instruments, and the price reflects that. But back in the day, if you were a new student just starting out, $100 for a student instrument was that was a stretch for a lot of families, and that's because minimum wage at the time was probably not quite $3 an hour. And so just it was a different time, and inflation and stuff changes our expectations on things. But the instruments that came out of Japan at the time were really bad. I'm talking about things like the frets not being measured properly in the guitar, and the guitar not playing out of tune, or that the bridge is not cut properly or glued properly, or the bridge is out of alignment, so the strings are actually not in line with the edges of the neck. They're off center a little bit. Tuning machines that were just really bad, necks that warped badly, all kinds of attempts to do like bolt-on necks on early Epiphones that warped and caved in the top, and things like that. So the Japanese instruments were really considered to be very low quality, and everybody wanted to have an American-made guitar. And but just like today, the price point, you would go there as a beginner to those markets of getting the inexpensive guitars. Well, over the years, the making of the Asian guitars moved from Japan, because Japan began to do really premium guitars. I mean, like Ibanez, where the instruments were like state of the art, and they far outstripped Gibson and Fender as far as the innovation and the designs and things. And then when Japan became this leading manufacturer of guitars, well, then to offset the labor cost, well, they offshored some of the labor for the lower level models to China, to Indonesia, to Vietnam, other places. There are some instruments that you might find, like if in the market, and you don't see them around a lot. I mean, you'll find guitars from Mexico that are high quality guitars that are pretty inexpensive just because the labor costs are cheap down there. And for stringed instruments, not so much fretted instruments, but they do make some. If you go to the Czech Republic, there's a lot of violins and cellos and things like that, but they do make some classical guitars in like Romania, the Czech Republic, that are around. German brands like Hofner, or Hüfner, because you got to put the umlaut over the O, the Hofner and Framus, they were all pretty much the second line of guitars, but in Europe they were considered to be very high quality, and indeed they are. They're made very, very well, and the prices reflect that. So the Asian guitars basically kind of took over the world. In the 90s or so, when I ran, it was about 1991 to 94, so I ran a music store up in Alaska, maybe a little bit longer than that. And during that time, Samick was the big guitar manufacturer. Probably every guitar that was under $1,000 in price was made in a Samick factory somewhere. If not the one in Korea, then somewhere in China or somewhere in Indonesia for the less expensive ones. And so as the guitar making has been taken over more and more by CNC type technology, for where the cutting, the drilling, the sanding, all this stuff is all automated now. So there's not, you're not paying people to do a lot of that. So the prices of the things have come down while the quality has gone way up. But right now, as we stand today, probably any guitar like you'd buy in the United States that's under $1,500 is more than likely not, well, it's just flat, it's not made in the United States anywhere. Just the labor costs are too high, the production costs are too high. Domestic guitars are all gonna cost, $2,000, $3,000 by the time they put all that in there. So then you have like your Mexican-made Fenders, you have like Japanese-made Fenders, then you have like Chinese-made Fenders. There are, when you get down to it, there are basically only so many stringed instrument manufacturers in the world, and some of them are made in really large factories. Now, let's talk about Correa guitars, the one that I was talking about a little bit ago, and I'm going to bring this guitar into the picture here in just a second. The Correa guitars, I found the first one I bought in it was a banjo actually. I bought off of eBay, and on just because the exchange rate between the United States dollar and the Australian dollar, that was a pretty good deal at the time. It was a very high quality instrument. I was very pleased with it. So a little bit later, I bought a guitar for my wife. Beautiful instrument, the one that's on the review that's here on the site. Those instruments are made in a factory in China, more than likely. It could be Indonesia, but it's probably it comes out of Guangzhou, China, I believe. The way the guitar market works is what they do is called OEM, original equipment manufacturer. So if a company like Epiphone, for example, wants to design a Les Paul and make it affordable, they may have it built in a factory in China, and then China builds it to their specifications and slaps the Epiphone logo on it, and then they sell that in the United States or wherever else in the world they might sell Epiphone guitars. Epiphone is an American company. It's got a long heritage here in the United States going back. It was one of the first producers of like archtop guitars back in the 30s and 40s, and so they were Gibson's competition in that big jazz guitar market for many years until Gibson bought them out, and then they repurposed the name for their student line or their entry-level line. But Epiphone's an American company, but the instruments it sells, not made in the United States, nowhere near the United States. Likewise, Correa is an Australian company. If you went to the headquarters of the company, if you wanted to write to them where their CEO is and all like that, that's in Australia. But the guitars come out of China. They probably come out of the same factory that the upper level Epiphones come out of. If you look at the really nice Epiphones, if you look at the really nice Ibanez acoustics, if you look at the really nice, Samix, Washburn, any of those different lines that come out of Asia, they probably come out of the same factory. And all they've done is they've got specifications to cut the headstocks to look a certain way, put certain finishes on them, and that they make those according to the specifications that the company that purchases them wants to, and they'll buy them in bulk, thousands of them at a time. They'll place big orders for them. Let's say you were considering having your own guitar line, and you decided, okay, well, to have them built in America, it would be too expensive, so let me go overseas. And so I'm going to target a price point. I'm thinking about the kind of materials I want. Which brings me to this guitar right here. This guitar doesn't have a name on it. This is my no-name 12-string. Actually, this guitar was built in a factory in China, an OEM equipment manufacturer called Aileen Music. You can look them up on the internet. It's AILEEN Music. And they have a website where you can go in there as an OEM equipment manufacturer type thing. You can go in there and say, hey, I would like to order a prototype for a guitar, and if it meets my specs and is good, I would consider marketing this instrument. A lot of people do this. And so you're starting to see guitars now come out of, especially out places on eBay where people are selling instruments. I'm trying to think of some Starshine. Oh, what else? Harley Benton, I think, is one of them. You're seeing instruments in the $200 price range that are, like, particularly in electric guitars, that are just outstanding. And they're names of guitars that you've never heard of before in most cases. And those instruments are OEM made. They're made in the same factory at Epiphone and Washburn, and those lines are made in. They're just made to somebody else's specifications. And this, on the Aileen website, they had an instrument that looked kind of like this. Same bridge, same top. But I decided, okay, here's the specifications I'm going to give them. I wanted an ebony fingerboard, an ebony bridge, with real abalone inlays, instead of binding on the headstock and the around the body, excuse me, on the neck and the body, being made out of some kind of plastic, I wanted wood, and so mine I ordered. It has wood, natural maple bindings all the way around. Beautiful. Let's see, I wanted a little abalone rosette around the strings. I didn't want Sitka spruce. For 12 strings, I love the sound of alpine spruce, and so I put that in my specifications. One of the really unusual specifications with this is that I wanted a extended headstock that I could put full-size tuners on the back, not the little mini tuners that you get on a 12 string. It's a mahogany neck, which is what I wanted. Let's see. Oh, and the back and sides. The stock guitar that they made in this design had mahogany back and sides. I wanted something a little more upscale, and so since they can't import rosewood into the United States right now, I specified Bubinga, which is like an African rosewood. So I gave them my specifications. They looked at it. They sent me within the week, they sent me a quote saying, okay, for your prototype, it's going to cost this much. It took them a couple months to build it and ship it to me. And when I received it, I got a chance to evaluate it. Actually, the first one I ordered from them came smashed. It got smashed in shipping, and the neck was broke off of it. So the second one, I said, okay, hey, we have to redo this here, and so I just had to pay shipping to get a second guitar, second prototype. I didn't have to buy a brand new guitar. But they sent me the second one, and then I spent some time playing this and evaluating. I had the idea of marketing this in the guitar market. There is there's kind of a gap. If you look at 12-string guitars, there's inexpensive ones, $150, $200, up to about $300, and then it jumps up to about $1,500. So I was going to try to hit a price point right around the $700 mark of a really quality, nice 12-string. And so anyway, when I got this instrument, it did have some issues that I was not completely satisfied with, so I didn't press on with the deal and have these manufactured in bulk. But it would have been an easy thing for me to just say, okay, I want to order 20 of them, put them up on eBay, sell them. When I sell those, order another 20, and then if it built up, well, you know, maybe I'd have, you know, Greg West Guitars, you know, Manufacturing Incorporated, and be selling these alongside of you know, guitars in the music stores. But the instrument was not as stable as what I really wanted it to be if I was going to put my name on it. I ended up doing a lot of work onto it myself in order to get it where it'd be playable, and it plays great now because I've done this stuff to it. But I wouldn't be able to do that to thousands of guitars, and so I think making the price point that I would want to hit there it was just not going to be feasible. So I didn't pursue it any further. But that's the way the guitar market works. If you want to have your own custom-made guitar line that you want to sell on eBay or in the music stores, or go to the NAMM show and try to, you know, find customers and stuff, it's not a very difficult thing to do. With the current way of doing the e-commerce, you can contact a Chinese company. Alibaba is classic for this. You could have guitars made for you to your specifications through a vendor using Alibaba as your go-between. They'll have people there to help translate for you. They'll help you with the customs stuff, the shipping, figure out how to get all that kind of stuff going, and you can do it. So the idea behind this is that American companies, Australian companies, German companies, when they're in that sub $1,000, or even today maybe under $1,500 price range, all of those instruments come out of China, Indonesia, Korea, somewhere, usually China. Giant guitar factories, and they can make these things to any kind of specifications you want. That's why when you go looking through Musician's Friend catalog, or you go looking through Guitar Center, if you look at the guitars in the same price point, so many of them look almost exactly alike. You end up with guitars that don't have a lot of personality because people didn't have a lot of imagination when they were designing them, putting them together. They were just trying to hit a price point, and they put in whatever features would be affordable at that price point. That's the way the guitar market works. If you want to buy a luthier-made, custom-made instrument, well, you'll wait for months, maybe even years for it. I had one made back in the 70s by John Graven. That guitar, if I still had it today, I'd kick myself for ever selling it. It'd be worth about $7,000 or $8,000. But that was, you tell him what the specs are going to be, and then he works that stuff by hand and has to sit for a while and wait for glues to dry and finishes to dry and stuff. It's not a fast process, and it's expensive, and you're paying for what that craftsman can do. And so nowadays you buy a luthier-made, a luthier-made instrument, your probably starting point is $3,500. Just because that's going to be what it's going to take for a person to build a guitar by hand. That just doesn't happen anymore by the big companies. There's usually some machine stuff and then a human finishing it on the upper level things like your Martins, your Gibsons, your Taylors. And when you get down to the under $1,500 that the rest of us play, that is this stuff is all made in a factory in China. So I hope that answers some questions that you have about the guitar market and the way it works, and maybe give you some ideas, like if you want to get into the guitar business yourself, and how you can do that. It's really not a hard thing to do. And so thanks for watching, and tune back in. We'll have more content coming up. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, and also check out the new videos on the channel for my electric album, my ambient guitar sampler for 2021. There's some new cool pieces on there that are kind of dreamy and weird and exploratory in nature, as I take the electric guitar into places that you don't usually expect it to go. So thanks again.